the only way they're going to surrender to him. Like I remember Govind Maharaj, the famous lecture, he was explaining how there's two ways you can come to Krishna. One is you can come voluntarily, or he'll use Maya to lash you, and you'll come crying to Krishna. That's another way. So when Krishna brings distress in our lives, we should understand that this is Krishna's mercy. This is Krishna's grace. Krishna wants what's best for us. And unfortunately, we don't even know how to properly desire. We are not sincere, most of us. Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj, he also explains that, he makes a statement that Prabhupada would often quote, don't be surprised by those who leave Krishna consciousness. Be surprised by those who stay. So from this, one can deduce that, unfortunately, the situation is such that most people will drift from practicing full-on Krishna consciousness. And a rare few souls will stay. So, in this Prabhupada goes on to make some interesting statements. He says, one cannot enter into the kingdom of Godhead unless one is perfectly cleared of all sins. The material sins are products of our desires to lord it over material nature. It is very difficult to get rid of such desires. Women and wealth are very difficult problems for the devotee making progress on the path back to Godhead. Many stalwarts in the devotional line fell victim to these allurements and thus retreated from the path of liberation. But when one is helped by the Lord himself, the whole process becomes as easy as anything by the divine grace of the Lord. Prabhupada explains, to become restless in the contact of women and wealth is not an astonishment. I suppose for women it would be men. Because every living being is associated with such things from remote time, practically immemorial, and it takes time to recover from this foreign nature. But if one is engaged in hearing the glories of the Lord, gradually he realizes his real position. By the grace of God, such a devotee gets sufficient strength to defend himself from the state of disturbances, and gradually all disturbing elements are eliminated from his mind. So, Srila is making this point. It's not a surprise if we become agitated by the objects of the senses. It's to be expected. And it's explained how even the greatest personalities fell victim to these allurements. But Prabhupada also gives us hope. He says the key point is that we have to learn to take shelter of Krishna. That's our only hope. So somehow or other we have to arrange our lives in such a way that at every moment we have the opportunity to take shelter of Krishna. Otherwise, as this purport illustrates, that there is no chance. There's no hope. In the next verse, it's explained, Nasta praya shabadresho nityam bhavat sevaya bhakti uttama shloke bhaktir bhavati nashtaki. That by regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed. A loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. And this is also significant. Here, the Sanskrit is Bhagavat Sevaya, but Prabhupada expands this. What does he say? What is...
There are two Bhagavat.
Yeah, what are the two?
Devotee Bhagavat and Book Bhagavat.
Book Bhagavat, yeah. So, the devotee Bhagavat, one who is considered to be living the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam, is considered none different to the book Bhagavatam. And it said by rendering service to these two, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed. And the Sanskrit is abhadreshu, abhadrani, which means basically material inauspiciousness. And this word is actually the same as anartha. It can be taken as the same as anartha. And see, the attraction that we have to the material temptations are these anarthas. And so Prabhupada and the Bhagavatam itself is giving us the formula to overcome these anarthas. That we have to diligently serve the Bhagavatam, whether it's the reading the Bhagavatam or whether it's serving those advanced devotees that live the Bhagavatam, or whether it's chanting the holy name. Only these processes can remove the anarthas that are there in our hearts and minds. It's quite interesting because it says here in the verse, is almost completely destroyed. Not everything is destroyed. In the final word of this verse is naistiki. And naistiki means that it's an irrevocable fact, which means basically one's faith is firm. Which means basically one has achieved the stage of nishta. And at the stage of nishta, it's described that 75% of anarthas are removed. There's another 25% left. It's not that all anarthas are completely removed. But it's quite interesting also to know that which anarthas are remaining, because 75% of anarthas are removed. And so the anarthas that we've acquired because of previous activities and habits, it's described that they're automatically removed by the practice of devotional service. In one sense, they're not considered the biggest deal. But the anarthas that are left are created, and this is kind of a warning to all of us, are created from offenses that we commit while performing devotional service. So when we commit offenses, as we chant or perform deity worship, anarthas are also created. And particularly, see, like for example, if at least Shivram Maharaj in Siddha Bhakti Chaitanya makes this point, that if we commit offenses performing deity worship, if you offer prayers and forgiveness, the Lord will forgive you. Or he makes a statement, even if you carelessly chant the Maha Mantra, you can nullify these offenses. But the real problem is when we commit offenses to the holy name. And we often, unfortunately, at least myself, mechanically, we recite the 10 offenses to the holy name every morning. The misconception sometimes is that we think that we only commit offenses to the holy name when we're chanting japa. But when we're performing activities throughout the day, we can be committing offenses to the holy name. In fact, it's described that, and there's two particular areas of offenses that are important to overcome. The first is Vaishnava Aparadha. That's the first offense. To blaspheme the devotees that dedicate their lives propagating the holy name. And we understand from scripture and past times in the scriptures how Vaishnava Aparadha, it disgusts Krishna basically. Of all things, this is something that he cannot tolerate. Even if you go to him personally and ask for forgiveness, Krishna will not. He said it's not up to me. You have to go to the Vaishnava and ask the Vaishnava forgiveness. And there are many pastimes to illustrate this. Now the problem is when we often we don't know how to deal with Vaishnavas, especially advanced Vaishnavas. But at the same time, if we don't take advantage of that association, we'll fall away. Right? The key to making advancement in spiritual life is to take association with those that are more advanced than us. But at the same time, because often we're a little neophyte in our behavior and interactions, we'll commit offenses. So you have this kind of like catch-22 situation. That's why it's important that we learn etiquette. Etiquette is the code of conduct that protects us from committing offenses to Vaishnavas. You know, there's a way that we're supposed to deal with senior devotees. There's a way that we're supposed to deal with devotees on the same level. There's a way that we're meant to associate with devotees that are junior to us. And as long as we're, we've not reached a perfected platform, we have to learn what Vaishnava etiquette is and follow it strictly to avoid Vaishnava pride. I mean, there's so much that can be said about Vaishnava pride. It's a class in of itself. But the second offense, and I'll finish on this, is inattentiveness when we chant. Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he says that root of all offenses is inattentive chanting. And inattentiveness has, it's described, has three manifestations. First is odasinya, which means that we're apathetic when we chant. It means we chant, but we're not really interested in the activity itself. We chant, but there's no enthusiasm, there's no feeling, there's no heart in it. It's just a mechanical performance. So this is the first type of inattentiveness. The second type is called jadya, which means that we chant in a very lazy mood. We chant very lethargically. In fact, so lethargically that the majority of the japa session is spent sleeping. And you know, we've all been through these stages. And unfortunately, sometimes you look around the temple, we see that others are going through these things as well. Or even we're awake, but we're lazy, so lazy that we don't even pronounce the Maha Mantra properly, or we miss parts of the Maha Mantra. So this is another manifestation of inattentiveness. And the final manifestation is vikshepa, which means we're chanting, but we're very distracted. Right, we're sitting there trying to chant the holy name. Just to mention that, I personally go through these things. I'm not just saying it for the benefit of everyone in the audience. I'm actually saying it so I can somehow wake up and try and avoid these offenses. But vikshepa means that we chant, but our mind is distracted. You know, we're thinking about what we're going to do today, or we're thinking about what we're going to do, what we did yesterday, or we're thinking about what that person said to me, rudely the other day, or we're observing others and how they're chanting, and we become distracted by that. So these are the things that we have to avoid in regards to inattentiveness. Bhaktisiddhanta Swami, in one famous purport, he describes what happens if we don't make an endeavour to overcome these offences. He says that one develops desires, material desires, anarthas, and he gives a whole list. So you can take your pick, which one you want to, which anartha you want to acquire. He explains how one acquires the desire to have yogic siddhis. One develops the desire to have recognition. One becomes or deviates philosophically. One becomes caste conscious. One becomes proud. So the point is, if we don't take our service to the holy name in a very serious manner, it's not that nothing happens, but there is a side effect. And the danger with these anarthas is that they can stay with us all the way to the stage of bhava. They're not so easy to remove from our hearts and minds. Their roots are very deep. So although the holy name is all powerful and can remove these things, they said that just by chanting Krishna once, one can remove more sins than he is able to commit. But it depends on the quality of the chanting. It depends on the quality of our relationship with the holy name. And the first symptom we'll see is if we're chanting inattentively, if we're committing offenses, is that the practice of devotional service has to have a certain effect. But it won't have that effect if we're offensively performing devotional service or chanting. The blessings that devotional service bestows will not come upon us. If we continue this way, then eventually what will happen is devotional service will be seen as a mundane activity. Like Prabhupada once, I think it was in Australia, he said that if you do not chant and hear properly, then one day these deities will become a burden. The deity worship that you're performing will become a burden. And the third manifestation or progression, if we continue this offensive mentality, is that we will eventually become inimical to our Guru and to Krishna. And this is kind of the culmination of the offensive mood. In fact, the example given in Shastra is of Ramachandra Puri. And because of his great offences, we see that he was inimical to his Guru eventually. He became a Mayavadi. And before, he was a disciple of Madhavendra Puri. And the scriptures give this example as a warning. In fact, it's described that when Ramachandra Puri, he left Jagannath Puri, the associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu were so relieved. In fact, Krishnadas Kaviraj, he explains it was like they had been carrying a stone on their head, and once he had left, they could remove that stone now. So also, we don't want devotees to feel like that about us. But if we continue to imbibe this offensive mentality, then this is our destiny. This is our outcome. And on a final point, someone may say, "Oh, but I'm not offensive, so this isn't relevant for me." It's explained in the second canto, I think, of Srimad Bhagavatam. It says that when one chants the holy name, tears do not flow from our eyes, our hairs don't stand on end, we don't shiver in ecstasy. These are the astasatvika regards, the external symptoms of ecstasy. If we don't experience these things, then one can understand one's heart is still framed. And Prabhupada explains that one can understand that one is offensive. Phalena parijiyate, you judge a tree by its fruit. So if we're not experiencing these things, ecstatic symptoms, when we chant, we can understand that to some degree, some more than others, that there's some offense there. There's some offensive mentality there. So, Prabhupada's books, they teach us how to become free from these offenses. And that's why it's our responsibility, as well as sharing this knowledge, that we have to also learn this knowledge and imbibe it in our lives. Prabhupada coined the expression, boil the milk. He wrote one letter, I think, maybe 75, 76, to the devotees and explained that because of preaching, our movement expanded. But he said that now we should take time to train our devotees. And he gave the example of milk. Some people, it's probably from India, to save money, they'll add water to milk. Right? Yeah? They'll add water to milk. But if you keep adding water to milk, eventually it will not be milk anymore, it'll be water. If you keep diluting it. So in the same way, Prabhupada was making this point, it's nice that we're expanding and expanding and expanding, but just like milk, at some point you have to boil it, make it very thick. So in the same way now, we should focus on quality. And so in the same way, we have this also responsibility that we have to share Krishna consciousness. It's Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's desire. But at the same time, we have to endeavor to also imbibe the knowledge that we're trying to distribute. Okay, at that point I'll stop. We've gone a bit over time.